Okay. The other pen.
Okay, so I should write it down.
Do you need anything? Paper?
No, it's
Just a pencil. Okay, so, your full name we need?
The one that was before I got married.
Yeah.
Helen, or actually Hinda. Hinda
Mm-hmm.
Spalter. Shin, Fei, Lamed, Tet, Reish.
Okay.
This is more basic questions than actual. Did you have any nicknames for your family? What was your birthday?
3/28, March 28, 1933.
Okay. And your birthplace?
Borova. Borova.
Okay.
Poland.
Where did you live and describe the place?
Well, I was very little, so I remember very little of that place. But then we moved to Mielec, which I don't know exactly remember what year, but in Mielec, I was 6 when the war broke out. You know, my memory is like really very limited. I know that we lived in a place that we rented from a Gentile woman, because my father was a grain merchant. He used to buy the grain like wheat from the farmers. So we needed space to store it in sacks because he used to sell it to the mills later on for grinding for flour. That was his business. In Poland, very few Jewish people could attend school even before the war because of anti-Semitism. And only some succeeded to go to the university, but Rubam, the younger kids, the boys went cheder and the girls went and were studying, you know, kindergarten and Beit Yaakov and stuff. I basically never attended school because the war broke out in 1939. I was 6. And my mother registered me for school, but Hitler came to power and the Jews couldn't attend.
Mm-hmm.
So my education was like on the sly. A student from the university would come and teach me in the ghetto. But basically the education, like Torah, Daddy, when we went hiding, Daddy taught us, my sister and I, because he was very knowledgeable. We came from a religious home. But after the war, when I was liberated, I was 11 and a half, and that was my first time in my life that I attended public school.
Okay. Okay. So just like tell about your family members.
Well, my parents, my mom and father. Daddy came from a family of 5 kids, which was a small family by, you know, usually they used to have 8, 10 children. And there were 5 brothers and 1 sister. And he was very close and to the brother that was 2 years older. They were in business together and they got married around the same time. And my father was working very hard, you know, during Yemei Hol, that kind of job required getting up very early in the morning because the farmers used to come to the Yerid on Thursday. Every Thursday in the center of Mielec there was a Yerid, and they used to bring everything. But in order for him not to have competition, we lived on the outskirts of the town, so he used to apprehend the farmers as they came in. He would offer them money for the fuah, and he would buy it off them.
Mm-hmm.
And mother used to help him. During the weekdays, used to get up very early. And mother, you know, those days, it was a very primitive life. We didn't even have bathrooms. We went to the outhouse, and we had not such a big apartment, 2 rooms and a kitchen. But all the cooking, my mother was an expert cook, and you kind of had to. But there was no refrigeration in the summer. Like they used to sell water, they would sell ice, and in the winter, I used to put it out in the snow because it was so cold. But to prepare already on Wednesday, she prepared for Shabbat, cooking, you know, did everything just so before this man because, you know, as I said, we were religious at home. They were Orthodox.
Okay.
Will you remember? You're not writing it down?
She's recording it.
Oh! Can you hear? Will it take?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Try with the other tape. Where do you have to?
We're there.
Where did you live after Germans came in?
Well, then the Germans started passing the laws because, Hitler already started very early, and the idea was to Lahashmit Kol HaYehudim because they wanted to free themselves of Jews. We were the element that were not a pure race, and they only wanted to have blondes and blue eyes, and the Jews, were always, even by the Poles, caricatures drawn always with a crooked nose and dark and stuff. They would recognize us right away as being Jewish, and the laws were passed right away. They wanted us concentrated in one place. First of all, they wanted our homes and stuff, and they formed a Judenrat, which is a committee of Jews in the town.
That are in charge of the ghetto.
And they were in charge of, when the laws were passed, that all the jewels and the jewelry and all the money and all the zahav should be given to the Germans. We felt if we give them, they'll leave us alone. But, all the laws, we couldn't go to school, we couldn't own a pet, couldn't own a dog, we had to give our dog away. And we had to give our apartment because they wanted us in the ghetto concentrated. So when the laws were passed for selections later on, when they started liquidating the ghettos, they wanted people to be in one spot because that would have been made easier for them. And so the ghetto was formed, and then we left everything behind and went into the cheapest of area, which normally would be the very, very poor people, destitute people, practically like a one room and a kitchen. But we lived in the ghetto for 2 years, we observed still. There was a curfew. You had to be home by 7 o'clock. You had to wear the band with a Jewish star, either here or here, sewed on with the name Yuda. And again, we couldn't go to the movies, we couldn't go to the school. Certain parks were just for the Aryan people and for the Germans. And they started catching the men mostly off the streets to send them to labor camps because they did certain amount of work with stuff. The reason why they came into our town, on the outskirts of our town, was a factory of airplanes. And they later on confiscated that, and they were starting to make airplanes, for the German, for the war. And, but all along, it was terrible terror. But when they first invaded our town, Mielec, we had the most beautiful shul. And it was Erev Rosh Hashanah. Part of the shul was being used for the shochet to live there and for the shrita, and also was used for the mikveh on the other side. And this gorgeous shul, they came and they burnt it down with the people inside. They bombed it. So that was like a beginning. And it got worse. And then we lived in the ghetto always for the fear of life and terrible, conditions and being humiliated. The fact remains our best neighbors, like neighbors, the Poles, they hated us before Hitler came to power. So some of them saved us, but the majority hated us with, sinah, terrible, jealous and hateful. And then March 1942 came to, we did not know it was going to happen. And unexpectedly, we started getting all the Jews out of their homes and stuff. Selections took place. They were liquidating the Jewish town to send them to concentration camps. The ones that were, like if you saw Schindler's List, there was a factory not far from us. And some people went there, younger people. The ones that were healthy and could work, they were selected and they were left to do the work, and the others were people that were aged people, they selected on one side, and the women, and then the women and the children were sent to Lublin, which was a town that later on became Makom Hashmada totally, and from there they used to also send them by trains to other places of Hashmada, concentration camp. But the men, some men were working, they selected to do the work for them. But luckily, my father had a friend who liked my father a lot. There were many rich Poles who wanted not to lose their money, the Germans shouldn't take their riches away and the fields away, and so they became Volksdeutsch, and they joined the Gestapo to be the German, work for the Germans. Happened so that one that did that liked my father very much. They used to deal in business, and he came to my father secretly on the 8th of March of 1942. And he says, tomorrow is the latest. Take your wife and children, leave everything behind, and come and leave. Because there's going to be selection. They're liquidating the ghettos, and you're going to be sent to concentration camp at best, if you're lucky. Otherwise, they'll shoot you on the spot. And so, further down, my father's brothers were in Borovostel. So it was 2 hours or an hour of drive. They didn't go in there. So here, our town, they were liquidating, but the family was there. And when we came there, we told them, it's going to happen to you too. They said, what did you do that the Germans are doing it to you? They didn't believe what was in store for us all. And so that was in March of 42. And then we went to another town. We stayed there, and then there was Pesach in another town. And they each time followed, liquidated. The same thing happened. And see, when we left, we couldn't, because Father said, dress up. It was on a Sunday that we left. Dress up as peasants, like we're going to church. So we had a horse, and not ours, but we rented, from somebody, horse and buggy. And we left in the morning, and we saw Germans coming. We made ourselves scarce and went off the road. Then we came to those towns, and then my father was smart enough, which was with God's help, because I don't know on his own, to have such wisdom, that he went ahead, and since he knew so many farmers, he offered one of them money, and he said, when it comes to the final solution where there's no place for us to go, would you take us in and hide us? Well, first of all, the Poles, Rubam, hated the Jews. He was a young man, married a year and a half, had a baby of 10 months, a wife, and they were very poor. And I could not even say they did it for money, because a lot of Poles hated us so that they would take the money, and while you were sleeping, they would kill you in cold blood. So he could have had the money, not risk his life, because the penalty was, if you keep Jews, if you hide Jews, you will be sent to a concentration camp. And it happened to his stepfather, because they had Jews, and they found them there, and they took the father. He never came back alive. So we were there in hiding. But it was not as simple as that. I mean, can you imagine 2 grown-ups and children in a tiny little place? It was partitioned off from the chava, from the pigs and the cows and the horses. We never went out. The only person that went out once a month is my father, because our farmer, they gave us very, very little food, and we were mostly starving, a piece of bread and water and maybe potato once in a while. And so you would sit there and smell everything that they're cooking, and you want to eat, you're starved, and we didn't have. Anyway, this one farmer that knew Daddy, he says, I cannot hide you because it's too dangerous, but come once a month, I'll give you some food at night. So he was the only one who went out at night, and he had to come back the same night before sunset, because so they won't catch him. And sometimes Poles recognized him too, because they knew him, he dealt in business with them. But the miracle of it is that how do you, 2 children and grown-ups spend 22 months in hiding with not being able to do anything a whole day, and during the day being constantly afraid that you're going to be found out, because the neighbors were so suspicious. And they would come And like if they saw them cooking potatoes, like you cook more for 6 people than you do for 2. And we had to be very quiet because during the day, you know, it was so hot in the hiding place. There would be a ladder. We would go up to the bottom and we would stay there very quietly. But, you know, we had to develop all kinds of gimmicks of sneezing, holding your nose like this, putting a pillow, you know, in front of your mouth. But the idea that 4 people, we never got sick. Can you imagine being not ever sick for 22 months? Because if we were, we'd have died because you couldn't go to a doctor. You know, we couldn't be found out. So this is how we lived for the 22 months. But like I said, it's easier said 22 months. Every day was so long and you always were so afraid. And at the same time, the Germans, our part of Poland, the Russians were the occupiers. They won the war in Russia. And in Germany, it was the American soldiers. And we were liberated by the Russians. So you could see that the Germans are already losing the war, kind of. But the front was going back and forth, and we had no more money to give the farmer. He was risking his life. My father made up, he never lied in his entire life, but he says, I have an otsar buried not far from my house, and, you know, you save us and you're so good to us, so with God's help we'll be saved, we'll make it worthwhile, you'll be a rich man. It was a miracle, you know, God was watching. What are you going to say? You cannot explain that because Father was hearing from neighbors who knew us and knew my father's brothers. Each time we could hear it over where they were having coffee, how they caught our family and how the Germans took them and killed them. So my father stayed all alone from a big family, a few hundred people. And then we were liberated in 42 by the Russians. Well, it wasn't so easy. We also had to cross the front because they were burning all the farmers' homes, and so the people were escaping, but we couldn't run away with the Poles because they would recognize us, kill us. So we went with a little derech through the back. Now the Germans saw us, they started shooting because the Germans were fighting still with the Russians, you know. Not all the places were already occupied by the Russians. The Russians heard them shooting, they thought they were shooting at them, so they shot back. And we were running in between, so we had to fall because the bullets from the Katyushas were falling a couple of inches from our feet. And I altogether couldn't walk because it's, I guess, malnutrition and being in such a cramped up place for 22 months. When I came out, I couldn't walk. So the Russians put me in the hospital and they took care of me. I don't know whether they gave me penicillin, whatever they gave me, food, nutrition, and then we were liberated that October of 44, which was very early because some concentration camps, like Auschwitz wasn't liquidated yet, there were still concentration camps. And our fear was, since the front was going back and forth, that you must have heard, like Kielce, there were Polish towns where Jews were found and the Polish people slaughtered them in cold blood. So the irony is that you survived the war, and you could be safe, but at the same time, if you're found by the Poles, you're free and you're not free, because they'll find you and they'll kill you themselves, which they did usually do to a lot of people that we know. But, then we went to the big town Krakow, and there already, many of our youth people as of 14, 16, they were partisans as young as they were. They got guns and that's how they survived the war. So they were in Krakow and how do you get there, On foot we couldn't because we were just too weary, and so we had to ask the Russians to help us. And they said, well, we cannot take citizens on our trucks because we are the army, it's against the law. But they took us anyway because they saw me, what kind of a condition I was in, and took me to the hospital first, and then they delivered us to Krakow. And there, shortly after, we had Well, you picture 22 months. You don't have a pair of underwear on. You don't have a dress or pair of pants that fits you. No shoes that fit you. And we were like practically naked because all the good stuff that mother had, we sold like diamond rings and engagement rings and whatever so that we could pay the farmer. And then they had joint distribution and other, Sochnut and all of them that were formed. And people from Israel came and established, they gave us clothing and they gave us food. And the idea was that we stayed in Poland only to get our bearings. But the toughest thing for me was my sister, may she rest in peace, was 3 years older. So she already was in school. I was never in school. And in Poland at 11 and a half, I had to go to school. And the Gentile girls hated me. I was the only Jewish girl, and they looked at me, well, what happened to you? How come you're alive? And I had to study under those circumstances, not knowing anything. Can you imagine not ever setting foot in school and all of a sudden you're only starting at 11 and a half? It was awfully difficult. But the idea was that we had to catch up. So I used to take, like later on when we were in Poland for a year and a half, and then the Russians, my parents were afraid that our idea was to go. My father wanted to go to Palestine with my sister, and my mom had family in America. So she says, well, you lost the whole family, but I have family there. Let's go to America. So he yielded, and we struggled while we were living in Poland. And later on, when we got stronger, we said we need to go. We were afraid that the Russians will close the borders, and they will not. It was a communist country, and to us they were very nice, but that could have changed at any time. And my father says, let's just leave Poland and let's go. So during those times, you can go like you were to go to the big city, to go to Germany, and from Germany, all the people that survived the wars, the young people that were orphaned, they went to Palestine. And we were en route to go to America. And we thought you needed to have a visa to go to America, papers. And you imagine those days, nowadays America lets everybody in, including our wonderful friends, neighbors here. We had to wait in Germany 5 years living with the Nazis until we got papers to go to America. And it was like terrible. Because you were living with Nazis, you heard them speaking German, it reminded you of the state that you were in through the war, that they killed, your families and stuff. And you had to look away, and not only this, you had no money. I mean, how are you going to live if you don't have any money? So, again, committees will give you something, but it wasn't enough, and we were growing children. But the main thing, we needed money for education, because it came to a point that we had to make 2 grades in one class in 1 year. So father, wherever he could to save up some money so that we could attend private school and to learn English so that we don't feel embarrassed when we come to America. So we went to Berlitz School for Languages, and we tried to catch up as much education as possible. Luckily, father taught us the alphabet and Torah and stuff in the hiding place, and then they opened up during that period of time for the Jewish surviving children, youth, a gymnasia, a Hebrew high school in Munich. And that's where we went to school. And this is the nicest period of my life, after the war, because I had young people my age, and I formed friendships, and before I didn't know what it is even to go to a movie or to a theater or to anything, or